My great-grandfather used to say that the only thing a map doesn't tell you is how to fold it up. The maps that I'm talking about here aren't the folding kind, but they are layered with information that can tell us a lot about cities. Geographic Information Systems, or GIS, is the digital mapping technology used by designers, engineers, social scientists, and a host of other disciplines to organize and map data about places in the world. The sort of data I'm talking about covers things you see through direct observation, like the location of trees, sidewalks, roads, and buildings, and things you cannot see, like land ownership and historic land use patterns. GIS mapping is a tool that we frequently use in the landscape architecture office where I work, and we used it in Hartford, Connecticut. In 2010, the United States Environmental Protection Agency launched a program called Greening America's Capitals. The program connects design professionals with U.S. state capital cities to develop vision plans that support distinctive, sustainable communities. The designers are asked to analyze the existing conditions of the city, to identify potential development sites, and to propose design interventions that will energize the public realm. Byrd Woltz Landscape Architects, where I work, was commissioned to do this for a mile-long corridor in the center of downtown Hartford called Capitol Avenue. Our first step was to make maps. This is an old map of downtown Hartford from 1893. It includes our study area and shows streets, rivers, parks, and railroads. Hartford's street pattern was pretty well laid out already in 1893. Bushnell Park is a good orienting figure. See if you can pick it out in the next map. This is a map that I made in 2011 using GIS. It covers nearly the same area as the map from 1893. You can see Bushnell Park at the top of the slide and the Connecticut River to the right. The historic streets are visible, with some major additions, like the I-84 viaduct that runs almost parallel to the railroad. This is our study area on Capitol Avenue. The Connecticut State Capitol and Legislative Building, the State Library, and the Connecticut Supreme Court and the State Armory, as well as residential and retail areas, are all located within this 1-mile corridor. This is what Capitol Avenue looks like in a satellite photo. And this map looks like what you might expect for an urban area like this. Buildings, streets, and parks are clearly visible. You can also start to pick out patterns in the urban fabric. Larger building footprints to the northeast are indicative of taller buildings found in a central business district. The smaller buildings to the south and west represent a more domestic scale, suggesting that these areas are residential neighborhoods. If you squint at the map, you can see and understand this pattern. Industrial and office buildings are located closer to the Connecticut River, and the residential areas are further upland. If you look more closely at the map, you may notice a puzzling exception to the west of Bushnell Park. Old industrial buildings, identified by their larger footprints, line Capitol Avenue as you move west, away from the Connecticut River. This is a sign that something else may be going on here, and the clue is in the historic map from 1893. There is one significant difference between this map of 2011 and the historic one. The Park River has disappeared. It would have passed right around these industrial warehouse buildings. In fact, these buildings were originally located here so that they could have access to the Park River. The Park River still exists, but in a conduit underground, and it collects all of downtown Hartford's stormwater runoff. And here is where the maps get interesting. This more typical-looking street map of Capitol Avenue allows you to identify patterns in the urban fabric. But by simplifying the map to its most essential parts, a reality of Hartford becomes strongly evident. There is a lot of pavement here. I made this map by altering the typical street map so that all hard surfaces, concrete sidewalks, asphalt roads and driveways, and buildings are shown in black. The white space represents backyards, public parks, and other unpaved areas. This map makes it very clear that downtown Hartford is mostly paved. This is not good for the urban hydrologic system. It means that after it rains, and in Hartford it rains 43 inches a year, most of the stormwater runs directly into the Park River through drains in the street. This has a devastating impact on local ecology, not the least of which is high pollution levels in the Connecticut River. It is an issue in Hartford that needs to be addressed. So, as the designers, we turned to mapmaking to investigate the next logical question. How are all of these paved surfaces being used? Obviously, some are roads. Many are buildings. But what about the rest? Let's look again at a more typical street map. Buildings are shown in dark gray, and roads are shown in light gray. By simply assigning the color red to areas tagged as parking lots in the GIS data, it becomes immediately obvious that parking lots dominate the built landscape in downtown Hartford. This discovery suggested to us, the design team, that to make a positive impact in Hartford, our design interventions must focus on minimizing parking lots and capturing stormwater runoff before it makes it into the Park River. A focus on stormwater management meant that we needed to understand how rainwater moves through Hartford's built environment after it hits the ground. We got the gist of the topography while walking around on site, and there is quite a lot of topographic change in our study area. A contour map helped to more specifically identify where high and low points are located. This topographic analysis helped us to locate the best spots for design interventions that would facilitate stormwater infiltration. But before we could go any further in identifying development sites, we needed to know who owned the land. Land ownership is a feature not readily visible on the ground. We knew that state-owned land was potentially available for development sites, and so it was important for us to understand if any land in our study area was owned by the state of Connecticut. It turned out to be a lot. So to leverage the state's land holdings for the creation of public amenities, we combined the state-owned land map with a parking lot map. We found quite a few overlaps, and it turned out that 3 of the state-owned parking lots were parking lots that we had identified as potential development sites on our initial site visit. When we overlapped all of this information, the location of the Park River conduit, surface parking lots, state-owned land, and topography, we revealed relationships between spatial, economic, and political conditions not otherwise apparent. These overlays led us to identify strategic development sites that supported the observations that we made on the street. As designers, making maps enabled us to know where we were going, and it was the first step in changing the story about Hartford, Connecticut.